Alright guys, HyDra here, and I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Huge set of Major 3 qualifiers today in terms of seeding going into the Major and also for the World Championship qualification down the line. So big results, especially for the teams trying to make winners, but also the teams on the fight of qualification. And Minnesota Rokkr today, big questions on them going into the Major after a difficult stint, and Kenny back to his best with that stint at OpTic Texas earlier in the season, rearing its ugly head again today. So much to get into. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Let's dive straight in because Cloud9 again today showed some degree of promise. And this may be concerning or not depending on your perspective, because all I'll say is it was roughly this time last weekend when Ravens had a difficult loss to Surge, after which they blew up the team. Today was actually a very similar story here for Cloud9, another team that's been, as we know, in a very similar boat. They trialled a change, as did Ravens. Eventually, Ravens followed through on a change, not quite the one they were initially going for, and maybe that's no longer possible for Cloud9 either, given the fact that Capsule is now playing for the Omit team down there in Challenges, but I guess if they wanted to get him, it would still be possible. Sib has not been as good so far this stage in general compared to where he's been so far this season, excluding the first few weeks, which were really bad. But since then, Sib's been much, much better. I think this stage he wasn't great, sure, until today, but it's not like he was on a particularly cohesive team environment. But game one, after going down massively to the Surge, they brought it back. Now, it's difficult to read too much into Surge, whether they've fallen off, because they've still had a good split here, like they've still won the majority of their series. But they've gone a couple of game fives, maybe that you wouldn't have expected them to, against teams they maybe should be beating more comfortably. But then again, they are still playing out of Vancouver, and how much that matters is a matter for debate. But still, the players will talk about it, right? From an internet perspective, they feel like they will be better placed on LAN. And also for Surge, how much is there really to play for? They're obviously going to be very confident that they're going to win these series, or even if they don't win them, they're still going to qualify in a good seeding for the Major. They're going to learn and practice for these series, right? So for Surge, did this series massively matter? Not necessarily. For Cloud9, this was everything, really, because a loss here makes things all the more challenging. And I mean, this map was not a great sign when attaches 17 and 26. Mack is double negative, and it's pretty much a trademark of Sib and Kremp doing most of the work. Goes to a game 5 in the end. It was a back and forth series, but in the game 5, when it mattered, Surge just steamrolled them, right? They just attacked B, got the bomb down. Cloud9, their defensive strategy, I mean, neither of their rounds were really any good, to be honest. And that's the thing, if you're C9, you need to find some sort of consistent game mode to try and get some wins in, and Search and Destroy simply isn't it. So with all the promise, Cloud9 find a way to lose the series anyway. And frankly, having got up 2-1 in the series, the way they lost was pretty bad. And, you know, they bombed out of it in the end. 0-4 drops a 1.3. The other guys played pretty well. But the notable thing, of course, on the C9 side is that Sib had one of the best series today that you're ever going to see. He had 117 kills for a 1.3 KD and near enough 15,000 damage. Like, that is absurd. I mean, if you look at the team that beat him today, the top damage dealer was Nastie at 12,300. The top damage dealer on Sib's team was 10,500. Sib nearly had 15k. Like, the guy was out of control. And they had so many kills, and yet they still lost in 5. Like, that's... You're not going to get that series out of Sib all that often, and it's not like Kremp played too bad either. When you've got that series from Sib, you know, there's no excuses to lose. But, of course, they lost. Again, it's going to be the usual suspect under fire. Max, you know, nowhere near as good as he was at the start of the season. Attach, of course, continues to kind of struggle. So I just do wonder, right, Surge advanced to 4-1. Cloud9 go to 1-4. They're going to start in losers again, and with some familiar company down there, frankly, in the losers bracket. Is it, you know, they're going to change before the Major. They've got a few days to think about whether they want to do it. But the other team that's going to be joining them down there in losers, certainly a very notable team for this World Championship battle, is Minnesota Rokkr. And after today, Boston, OpTic, Miami, they'll be feeling pretty comfortable, right? Because the top 5 in the league is very clear. FaZe are going to be there at champs. Thieves are going to be there. Toronto, Surge, and then Ravens, right? They've scored enough points. They're going to be fine. It's a battle. It's a 5-way battle for 3 remaining spots. Miami, OpTic, Boston, and then Rokkr and Cloud9. And after today, is anyone picking Rokkr or Cloud9 to make champs? I think they still could, but it's not looking especially likely right now. And This was a very interesting series. Kenny came into this Rokkr team. They looked better, right, since the removal of X. Kenny individually seemed to be finding his stride, seemed to be having a good time, was definitely playing some better Call of Duty. But was that just a honeymoon that was due to come to an end? Rokkr still feel, to me, like a cursed organization. There's something wrong over there. There's some reason why they just can't seem to make it work. And whatever their team looks like and however good their team chemistry turns to be, I don't know. They just find ways to lose. And they'd found plenty of ways to lose so far this season in Game 5. Today they found ways to lose in 4, which is probably an even worse sign. This was the Game 1. Wasn't really that close. I mean, look, we talked about it yesterday. If Metals turns up, then probably they're going to win. And Metals turned up today, so it was pretty much going to be over. Look, Heretics are good, don't get me wrong, but this is a series, if you're Rokkr, you simply have to win. It's such an important series for champs. You want to restrict Miami getting the points. You need to score those points yourself. And yeah, Kenny comes out the gates today and has another bad series, right? I mean, he'd had pretty good series so far on this Rokkr team. It was kind of like, okay, is Kenny back? And since the OpTic stint, was he ever going to drop to those lows again? But after today, the question is very much still there as to like, look, maybe this just isn't Kenny's game, or he's past it, right? That's another, accusation, let's say, that's flying around right now, because today was not a pretty day, especially given what Kenny's trying to get out of these other guys. The big issue, I think, for Kenny, really, is that his search and destroy online has never been good. And if you've got teammates that can compensate for that, it's okay. But if you're like the main leader, who's obviously meant to be leading the charge in that sense, it is going to be problematic. And you could see it. I mean, they lost the search. They didn't get to do it again, but they went down 6-3 here on the rewind search and destroy. That was a 2-0 deficit. They fought their way back admirably in the control. They won that one. I think it was on the vault. And then they went to a protocol hardpoint and again, kind of got slammed, really. I mean, Nero had a horrific map here, which, look, it happens. Nero's an inconsistent player, but it's not like the ARs, where necessary, stepped up to the plate. So, frankly, Heretics ran away with a pretty straightforward victory for them. They'll be very happy with the outcome. But for Kenny and for Rokkr, this is where the big questions are raised. They didn't score really any points at all. I mean, let's be real. OpTic have been struggling and Rokkr lost to them. So I guess you could read between the lines and say that it's not going to get that much better for them as of late. And frankly, it hasn't. They probably should have won a couple of round 11s in there, but against a team that's clearly playing pretty well in Heretics, they really can't get that close to them. Could have been a 3-0, and Heretics advanced to a nice little 4-1 run for them. So as Kenny says, GG's Miami, lost 3-1 onto the major, came out slow flat versus a good team. Sucks, but got to make a good run of land. It's not necessarily over for them yet. Frankly, it won't be until Major 4 where they could still make a run, but I think that a loser's run for Rokkr here is absolutely necessary. They're stuck at around about 100 points. Cloud9 are stuck at around about 105 points. The cut line, as I say, right now is about 130, 140, and it will get higher than that as things go forwards. So Rokkr, they desperately need a bare minimum top 6 of the major. Top 6 will get them 30 points on the board. That puts them back in the conversation. Any less than that, it's going to be a real challenge. And right now, when you bet on it, I mean, Kenny's come out today and dropped a 0.6. That's just the reality of it, right? We've seen some bad series from Kenny earlier on in the season, and this is his first real stinker here for Rokkr, but it's a stinker at a difficult time because it was such an important series. The search was bad, the hard points were bad, and yeah, if at the end of the day, if you're going to drop bad numbers, then you've got to make sure you're getting the best out of the team, and that wasn't really happening either. So Rokkr have a real long road ahead of them right now, and as it stands, are they favourites at all to make it to the World Championship? I certainly wouldn't argue so. So plenty to think about for Kenny as well, and that team as time goes on, because they find themselves in a very precarious position, especially because they're not going to make any more changes, right? Like, that will be their team to the end of the year. I'm sure Cloud9 potentially could. Maybe they could even take a step. This next series was strange. I mean, I don't really know what else to say. Game 1, Toronto, for some reason, like, this team online creates some strange results for good and for bad. People are going to say exit lag and stuff like that. I think it was more so they expected to just absolutely demolish LAG Gentamates this series, and they did after the Game 1. But they literally got 70 point clubs Game 1, and that is the 15th worst KD in or performance in the history of the CDL. That's the second worst this year and the 15th worst ever. So it's pretty remarkable actually to think about. But they did bounce back. it came from JoeDeceives, really. What a player this kid's turning into. Funny that Beans had just a terrible series, but they still won, and I think they frankly were probably always going to. Kismet nearly made an insane play, but it didn't work out for him in the end, and like, Kismet had a great series today. It wasn't enough in the end, and Toronto were just a little bit too good. I think both Kiz and Johnny have played pretty well so far. Like, I think that's a duo that they at least want to be thinking about where they go from here. Not to say Gentlemates can or will do anything from now to the end of the season, because frankly, I'm not sure it's going to make all that much difference at this point. But as Bean says, somehow won that series. My teammate's a beast. You know, he drops the Tony Snell meme on the timeline. And of course, they're going to be turning up to Miami to try and make things right in terms of what they've done over the last couple of events. And as Adamu says, from the Toronto Ultra side, no refunds on Joe, right? So again, he's still definitely throwing some shots the way of the LA Thieves, who sold them to, sold him to them. MVP, steal of the century. And to be fair, that was very evident on the final map of the series. He had about 46 kills on the vault to get the victory. And he says map 1 was a movie, but after that, things definitely turned around. So Kiz had a 1.3 for the loss. Rough series from FeLo and Johnny, really. I mean, look, to be fair, there was a lot of stat padding happening game 1. Not stat padding, right? Like, they won so dominantly, the stats looked remarkable. After that, it turned around, but JoeDeceives and the mega result to get them over the line. Beans with a 0.6, he was dropping Kenny numbers today. You're not going to see that very often, right? So I think Toronto could be happy enough. Look, Gentlemates went 0-5, rough stage for them. Toronto went 4-1, plenty of 4-1 teams, and the bracket is going to look pretty crazy by the time this weekend is concluded. And for a second, it really looked like Falcons were going to do it here in the final series, right? They took the game 1 against FaZe. They brought some unreal energy to this series, by the way. Like, I know that people are going to say, oh, they sound like they're playing champs finals. And yeah, they do, but that's like perfectly fine, right? The energy they bring into the table here is sensational. When you went to the listening during the game 1, FaZe have struggled in hardpoint lately, for sure. This is not a map that they would probably play Falcons on if they were to play at a tournament. They probably, I would say, wanted some reps on the skyline. It's a map that Falcons enjoy, for sure. And Pred and Xnid just absolutely slammed them. I mean, Drazah fell off the map at this moment. Pred was just bringing insane energy and also pace. I mean, there's no way you can tell me that Pred is playing the same type of COD now that he was when he was on OpTic. I think he feels a bit more motivated, which is interesting. I don't exactly know what's brought that out of him, because surely there could be nothing more motivating than playing for OpTic, with the guys that he's been on, trying to replicate some of the success of the previous season, playing for that fan base and everything. But yeah, it seems like Pred's a bit of a different man now on this team. Maybe Xnid's part of it, but he was also part of the hype squad for last season's OpTic team as well when Pred was in the picture. But you're not going to see this all that often. Faye is getting pretty much trounced in hardpoint. Simp has not had a good stage. Now, turning up to the major, I'm not expecting that to stay the same, right? I'm expecting Simp to come different. But still, look at this scoreboard. Pred's 31-15 at this time. They're up 100 points, and eventually they close out the map 1 relatively comfortably in the end. It was an absurd game 1 performance really by Falcons. But after that, it did go downhill relatively swiftly. This will, of course, be the map that Falcons look at and remember fondly. But it was a really big series for FaZe, right? Because I knew that Falcons were going to be dangerous in this one. Their hardpoint is too good for them not to at least be dangerous. The thing is, FaZe are too strong elsewhere that I just couldn't really see Falcons finding a way to win. If they were going to win, it was probably going to have to be a 2 hardpoint and a game 5er. And that's nearly what it could have been. But in the end, they just about fell short. FaZe is an important win, though, because had they lost this series, especially emphatically, their winners bracket chances would have actually been relatively slim. They'd have had to beat OpTic, and probably convincingly to do so. Now, they're okay, and I'm sure OpTic tomorrow, OpTic's perspective tomorrow might be kind of interesting. Part of them may think, FaZe are beatable. Part of them might think, well, with FaZe have nicely warmed up maybe coming into the weekend after this series today. The next 2 maps, nothing much happened apart from FaZe absolutely destroying them, right? I mean, like the search was a 6-0 whitewash. The control was a hot little 3-0 on the protocol. So definitely a lot of work still to be done for Falcons there. But credit where credit's due. Like, Falcons have gone from a team that looked completely woeful in hardpoint. I mean, not even looked, literally were. I know that it was a different team, but that was the worst hardpoint team we've ever seen in the history of COD. And here we've got Pred dropping 40 in 27 on FaZe. Yeah, they lose, but it was a really tight red card. This is a map that FaZe like. This is a map that they will play. They really enjoy this one. And their heart, and Drazah is excellent at this map as well. Simp actually started real bad, then he got a streak and he started to bring it back, so a big takeover from him towards the ends. But yeah, Pred dropping 40. Again, do I think this Falcons team has what it takes to win an event or something, right? I still have my questions about the pure, fundamental, raw, underlying slaying power against some of the top teams. But the recent performances are giving me much more faith that Falcons, even in the shorter and the longer term, will actually have what it takes to be a competitive force. So Prid ends up dropping a 1.26 for the L. Pretty tough series out of Arcetes against his former teammates, has a 0.7. And on the other side, it's Cellium with another great series, Drazah 2. And then, things to think about for FaZe. But they shouldn't be that concerned. They backs against the wall. They won the series when it mattered, but again, in the hardpoints, they're definitely gettable at, and frankly, Falcons can take on anyone in hardpoints, and tomorrow, FaZe play OpTic Gaming as the final match of the stage. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.